Hi, Dr. Roman. This semester for my placement, I was at Waite High School again, and in this video, I'm just going to kind of explain what I did each day. Over the course of the semester, I went about 10 times, so I wrote down, like, in my planner what happened every single day, and just talk about it and kind of explain some of the things that I saw and the amount of students that I had and what happened. So the first day that I went was February 7th, and on that day, the students were reading poems, and they also did like essays, and this was for junior and senior level classes. So my teacher had one AP class, and then she also had several juniors and then several senior classes as well. So they read poems, and then they also did things about pickup lines because the poems that they read were about like romance and love and things like that. So my teacher just had a whole bunch of pickup lines from the internet, and they just kind of had fun with that, like analyzing them, things like that. And then they also read The Devil and Tom Walker, and they listened to an audio tape of that. So that was the first day, and it was kind of like nerve-wracking, but it went pretty smoothly, pretty exciting. I was also late that day, which was not very good, but the traffic was crazy. There was an accident, which I'll mention several other times because that happened quite often on my way to Toledo. Anyways, okay, so the next day that I went was February 14th, and that day they also read Paradise Lost by John Milton, and then I also helped read a history test to a student that was in one of the classes across the hall. Needs assistance with testing and things like that, so I just went to one of the rooms, like the copying room, which is like right next door to my teacher's room, and then I just helped him with the test and just read him the responses and the questions and things like that. And then something that I also got to see was the chili contest, and it was a pretty big deal because all of the teachers were talking about it that day. Like from the moment I got in the room, my teacher was talking about it. But there was a chili contest that took place in the teacher's lounge, so we went to lunch, and they had all the chilies that people decided to bring in, and they were taste testing it and things like that. So that was just kind of like something fun that I got to see. Not really like too much in the classroom that day, just because I did help the student with his history test, which I had to do before and after lunch, and then I also like ran copies and did a lot of stuff like that. So the third day that I went was the 21st of February, and there was a substitute teacher that day because my teacher's child got sick earlier that morning. So I showed up and there was a sub, and I was also late that day as well due to traffic, but they read Dante's Inferno. They just read like an excerpt from that, and then just kind of read that silently to themselves and read it out loud, both. Then they also worked on an outline for the research paper, and then they also read Minister's Black Veil as well. So they did like a lot of kind of in-class reading, I guess a lot of like what you would say busy work, considering that there was a sub, and my teacher wasn't there, so there really wasn't like a lot of things to actually grade. It was just reading and working independently on things. And then the next day that I went was the 28th of February, and students worked on their rough draft for the research paper that day as well, and then they also read Fall of the House of Usher in class also. And something else that I also got to do that day was go to an assembly, and they have something called Coming Home, which is really interesting because I've never heard of this before, and it's something that I didn't do in high school, but it's pretty much kind of like the opposite of homecoming. So homecoming is in the fall, so it's like around football, and then coming home is actually like around basketball. So something also that they do is that instead of having homecoming where there's a king and a queen, which is what I'm used to at my school, they just have homecoming is for the queen, and then coming home is for the king. So they had the candidates, there's usually, I believe they said like 10, and then they whittle it down to like 6. This year I think only like 4 were eligible, just because they didn't have the grades necessary to do that. So it was just really neat to do that. There was like an assembly, classes were shortened, all because of that. So it was interesting. And then I also learned that day that weight is on continuous watch by the state, and then or continuous improvement, and then Toledo itself is on like the watch. So but weight has continued to improve, which is something that's really positive. And then that day I also interviewed my teacher and just kind of like talked to her about her classes and what she does and what it means to be an integrated like language arts teacher. So that was really neat just to get some of her insight and perspective on things, just to hear what she thought about like paperwork and standards and testing and all that jazz. So I also went following Thursday, we had spring break, so I went the 14th of March, and it was kind of pretty much like their grammar week. So they did things with restrictive and non-restrictive clauses, and then the classes also worked on their nonfiction paper. So in class they like worked on their outlines, and they had books that they checked out from the library and did that. And that was also OGT week, so class periods were shortened, and I stayed for OGT week. I stayed while they did the science test. So I just kind of sat there for 2.5 hours. Didn't really do much whatsoever. So my teacher said she wanted me to be a part of that experience, which was interesting. And then the following Thursday, the 21st of March, they read Gulliver's Travels. And then they also watched part of the movie, the one with Jack Black, just because they were talking about parody and satire, things like that. So before that, they had worked a little bit with A Modest Proposal by Jonathan Swift, but then they watched like Gulliver Travels, things like that. And then they also read, they also worked on the research paper and talked about like how to do MLA format. I answered some questions with that. And then I also worked on making a bulletin board about The Great Gatsby, which they just finished last week. And then the 28th, I went, and they also did more with parodies, which was really fun, just because the students made up their own parodies, and that's really, I think, the most that I've seen them enjoy English class. And they made up parodies to songs that were relevant to them and songs that were like modern and now. So they made them, and then they like wrote down the lyrics, and then for extra credit they could perform it. So I did get to see some of them perform it. Other people just spoke it instead of actually like singing it or rapping it, but it was still neat just because they had so much fun with it, and it was just an English concept that they need to know, but they were still able to relate it to their lives. And then the AP students also worked on the research paper. And then also that there were also locker sweeps, so there was kind of a lot of interruptions just because people were getting called out of the classroom for having things in their lockers and stuff like that. The following Thursday, which was April 4th, they were on spring break. And then the next Thursday that I went was April 11th. I went to the book room and got a lot of books out of there. I also made copies. They did more with like poetry, things like that. They started reading The Great Gatsby, and then they also worked on an outline and read William Blake poems and things by Wordsworth. The 18th of April, I did not go because my teacher had a sub. And then the 25th of April, which was the last day that I went, so last week, they were doing things with Jane Eyre, and then they also worked on like a packet for that test that's coming up. But they have Jane Eyre as like independent reading, so they're supposed to like read so much every night, like usually like a chapter or 2 chapters maybe, depending on the length of them. And then they also listened to one of the chapters in class that day, which was neat. So those are kind of just a breakdown of the days. Overall, I enjoyed my experience at Waite. I wish I had gotten to do more, and again, I don't know if that's just because I need to take more initiative, or if it's just kind of because like my teacher had several student assistants, so they would always like grade papers or like run errands for her, or just because when I was like there, things were already done. There wasn't really that much for me to do. Like the things that she had left to grade were essays, which she would grade. So I did what I could, but next semester I would like to be more involved, and again, that could be me taking more initiative in the classroom. But overall, I really liked interacting with the students that I had and my professor, not my professor, my teacher. So I enjoyed the experience. And